I was actually told today at work that I shouldn't share my movie recommendations because nobody likes them.
What?
Well, I mean, they're mean to me because...
Do I need to come to the office and have a talk?
It was a love shove, for sure.
Hi, Mark Elliott.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You were tilting your head in such a, inquisitive puppy way that it was making me laugh. Yeah. Welcome back to another episode. What number is this now?
This is number 7 because our
if it's
navel
beyond me
gazing...
counting on one hand, it's too many.
Navel gazing was number 6. Remember, we were going to catch the top edge of the first half for our...
Yes.
Reflecting on how we were doing and celebrating.
Perfect. Well, how was the end of school for your districts that you support?
I think there's been heartache around the region because of staff reductions, and I heard the phrase persistent uncertainty this week, and it applied to the federal uncertainty on what's coming and what's going, and then budget uncertainty as lots of things play out in the macro and microeconomics of K-12 and the states we live in. And that phrase persistent uncertainty has stuck with me. So I think there's been some heaviness because of the people who are leaving and not coming back at the end of school this year. The persistent uncertainty about if there are things happening during the summer that we don't have control over that also impact what back to school looks like. But in general, still buildings full of smiling kids and teachers celebrating and kicking heels together at surviving another year. I think especially those middle school teachers who seriously get extra life bonus points for surviving middle school teaching each year.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, I think it was just a tough year all the way around with that persistent uncertainty that you were talking about and the way that it affects not only our teachers and our systems, but our parents and our families. And in particular, the fact that I work in the state capitol has a lot of impact, maybe a little bit more impact when it comes to changes that occur at state agencies and federal agencies and things like that. But yeah, we made it.
We did.
Our teachers are having a nice break now. Hopefully they're getting some downtime so we can ramp back up for next year. And this is our time. This is our time to get stuff done.
Yes.
Which seems to be less and less and less every summer. And now, as much as we expect our schools to be empty so we can do things, that's happening even less now. People are just around. So it's hard to find time working around other things that are happening in the building and projects that we just need to get done. So,
yes. Are you like we are, where the clock started ticking a couple of days ago for us to have our stuff done and things moved out and around for the floor waxing brigade? Do you have that tension and that balance between the floor waxing and then being able to move things back in August before everyone arrives?
It really seemed like in my previous district, which, gosh, that was officially now 11 years ago. So it's hard to even say that. That was a bigger issue then. But the last 2 summers, we've been installing safety vestibules in our schools that don't have them. And that's been the bigger thing because there's a technology component that goes with that capital construction piece and working with them and making sure that that's done in time for school. Which is always a super tight race. So that's kind of our bigger things this summer. But it is summer. The sun is coming out. The days are nice and long. It's my favorite time of the year for sure. But we're making some changes. We just implemented something I know you're very interested in, and I didn't tell you this. We acquired Abnormal.
We have to talk.
Yeah.
Either we bore people or not bore people on the podcast. And actually our guest today, maybe we'll touch on email security.
Possibly. So that is kind of my lead into our guest today, who is the preeminent cybersecurity expert in our ACPE organization.
Yes.
And with that, I will let Rachel introduce today's guest.
Yes. And folks may be guessing already, but we will be excited to welcome to the stage. And Mark, are you doing that part or do I do that part and talk at the same time?
I don't get the rights to do it.
That's right. I block out your power. So we're going to welcome from backstage April Mardock, who I have known now for, I believe, almost a decade, if not a decade, informally at first, and then joined on several projects the past 5 or 6 years, and in groups really dialing in security, how we plan for incidents, how we respond to incidents, how we continue learning together. April is the Chief Information Security Officer at Seattle Public Schools, is one of the national preeminent voices on security, has been on a couple of national podcasts, I think, here recently. And April and I more recently have been joined together in the Government Coordinating Council with the Department of Education and Homeland Security and CISA and the alphabet soup in DC. That those groups across most of the critical infrastructure have been disbanded now at the federal level. But there is IST, which is a nonprofit group in California that has picked up the K-12 sector work on this. And April and I still get to be part of this conversation and part of this large effort at change making across domains. And maybe we'll touch on some of the details on that later. So April, you are the person that I listen to, that I come to for advice and counsel, and just really appreciate the sharing that you do in our community and really respect the technical skill as well as the people and the change management skill that you have just been refining so beautifully the past decade.
Thank you. It's really a group effort, as you well know. And it's actually, some of my work was founded teaming with some of your folks back when Jared was on your team.
Yes.
He kickstarted me and pushed me into a more public place in sharing this kind of content and making it available. He was a cheerleader on the side for a bunch of districts to improve their cybersecurity. And although he's moved out of K-12, that legacy lives on. So it's kind of partly your fault.
I'm happy to be in that Venn diagram. And it was Jared Fulkins and then Nathan McNulty, I believe a lot of ACPE knows, for the Microsoft and Microsoft security sharing and leading that he did for so many years. And I think is not in the Pacific Northwest now, but still in the larger Northwest.
Yeah. And actually, I think he just got Microsoft MVP this year.
I did see that. Congratulations, Nathan.
If you're listening, we appreciate you and all that you did to help build the foundation for K-12 cybersecurity. And now we're moving forward, full speed ahead.
We are. So before we jump into too much security, April, you've listened to at least a couple of episodes. Know that we try to learn learning more every episode. But we usually banter a little bit, kind of do the plugged in section of the Plugged In podcast around pop culture, which can include all different types of things. And before we get into maybe some video games and other things, I'm going to drop in. Okay, so we picked the right topic. I saw April's face. I just want to say, Mark, that we have a couple of podcast listeners in my region who are now watching Murderbot. Are you adding anything new to your rotation? Did you make it through a season yet?
Well, Murderbot's mid-season. I'm also mid-season on another show. So I typically, if the weather is not great, I spend at least half an hour on a treadmill almost every day. But I have a big TV like right in front of it. So I watch a lot of TV while I'm on the treadmill, which makes it go a lot better. So that's how I get through my shows pretty well. But Murderbot is mid-season, and that's a super fun one. And it is golf season. So I started watching Apple TV's Stick with Owen Wilson. So I am all caught up on Stick. I got caught up last night, which is just a great story about a young guy who is just a golf phenom, but has had a lot of struggles in his life to deal with his talent and a pushy parent and some things like that. And it's a fun show. It's a kind of a little Ted Lasso-ish, I think. Not quite, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, good.
Nicole and I watch a show when we eat dinner. So we're on the second season of White Lotus. I really am not a big fan.
Thank you for validating. I really did try. And then after the episode with Corey, I went back and tried again. It's so inane.
It's just hard to watch.
Sorry, Corey and the White Lotus fans. Although I will probably fast forward through the Parker Posey season. I'm a big Parker Posey fan, and the voices that she does and the affect that she has, I will probably fast forward through and just watch her scenes.
But I'll be honest, I'm a big Alexander Skarsgård. Actually, I'm a fan of all the Skarsgårds, and that's why I think I just am predisposed to enjoy Murderbot. But, that's my thoughts. April, what are you watching?
Well, actually, I was listening to the podcast, and I'm going to have to go find Paradise because that sounds quite intriguing.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
That's on my to-do list. I'm a little bit more classic. I went back and started to watch the Foundation series on Apple TV.
That's coming out. When's it? Is the season 3 is coming out? 3?
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed Foundation. I haven't read it.
I did read it, and it's quite a jaunt from that, but it's still, at least in my opinion, I mean, I know there's a lot of haters on it, but I think it does some of the core concepts true. right? Asimov had such a big picture and his layers of politics and intrigue and governance, and just the whole structure feels right for the books, even though it doesn't follow, the letter of the plots and
right. And I was chatting about that series with some of the folks in my department a while ago. Was that one of the books that they said you could never make a TV show out of this? And the other one was The Three Body Problem. Which I enjoyed immensely too. And then I did all of the books on audiobooks, or as an audiobook, and I listened through all of them, and I thought, wow, this will be really interesting to see if they actually continue Three Body Problem, well past the first book or two books. But I don't know if you caught Three Body Problem, but I also loved that one quite a bit on Netflix. So good.
Okay.
So if you like Foundation, you might like, Three Body Problem was written by a Chinese author. So there is a lot of historical Chinese politics involved in the Communist Party, or the certain Chinese parties that were kind of rotating in and out of power. And then you throw some aliens in there that want to come to Earth. So
interesting ideas.
It is. And they try to keep that one very, at least in the series, it's realistic, right? It's not so science fiction that there's lasers and all sorts of crazy things. There's a little bit, but you should check it out.
It's not over the top. I'll have to.
No, it is not a space opera by any stretch of the imagination.
I like my space operas too.
I do too. Love them.
I don't know if you guys knew I am a member of the 501st, which is the Star Wars cosplayer group. And so I have a full-on stormtrooper set up, and I've got a biker scout set up, and we go do children's charities work all over the state. It's pretty cool.
Oh, April. Is it fairly active many times a year? Is it?
Oh, they do it every weekend pretty much.
Okay.
That doesn't mean I do.
Okay.
But they do, yeah. In fact, I think the group as a whole cleared like $20 million in donations because people pay them to show up for weddings or events, and the money gets donated off into like the children's hospital and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
That's fantastic.
So it's bad guys doing good, right?
Yes.
And it's always fun to run around and
so it's
like
just the stormtroopers.
Character. It's not just stormtroopers. It's any of the Star Wars characters. And there's essentially the folks that dress up. You actually have to be costume accurate, and you go through a whole review process. You have to be able to prove that you look like the movie character that you're trying to portray, and then you get certified, and then you can go join the events. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, that is a big deal. It is a big deal.
A lot of fun.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very cool. I mean, okay, just to keep sliding back, I think, April, you and I could talk about TV and movies for quite a while. I think we have the same taste, and everybody around me gets sick of it because I'm just a straight up sci-fi person on sci-fi fantasy. If anybody is interested, I'm on my third listen through on a 13-book series right now because I drive so much between home and work. It's called Expeditionary Force. It's Craig Allenson. He publishes straight to Amazon, and it is a really fun space opera-y kind of thing that includes a very snarky and a-hole is how he's referred to artificial intelligence that's millions of years old that just happens to really like the human beings that it's with.
Don't even get me started on amazing audiobooks. Have you seen any of the Bobaverse ones?
Oh, I've read all the Bobaverse. I'm totally caught up on Bobaverse. I'm good there.
Not to go too far down that path, but that's a great.
Bobaverse actually throws a reference out to Skippy in one of them, and Skippy is the AI in the Expeditionary Force.
I was kind of wondering about that.
Yeah, and I just have. It's such a fun series because there's a lot of problem solving in it. But the first book is tough to get through because the author, I think, provides way too much backstory on the eventual main character and, how he ended up where he's at. They could have cut half of that. Just get to the part where he finds the AI and it's hilarious. The whole mood of the book changes from that point, and it's just amazing. So Expeditionary Force, first book is called Columbus Day. And
we'll find it.
Deal with the first 3 quarters until you get to the artificial intelligence.
We'll turn the speed up a little.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay. I think on our Raindrop account, which is the bookmarking app that we have for this, I'm going to have to start a leaf that links to the book series, the shows, the music. As I've been sitting and listening the past couple of episodes, we need to capture all of these. So I'm on it. We'll share that out in the weeks ahead.
Undying Mercenaries, another good one.
Okay, we'll
All
keep
right.
adding to the list. It's a good thing we're recording this because then that way our memories will remember it.
I know.
Well,
All right,
sci-fi.
April.
Sci-fi.
Go.
Dune
What's your favorite?
Awakening. Dune Awakening.
I
It's
haven't
fairly
played
new.
it. And Dune is one of my favorite books I read, at least the ones that they made the movie out of, but I haven't played it. Is it good?
I
Obviously
love
it's
it.
good. You really
I love it because
Is it a co-op? Like, can you play with people?
Oh, yeah.
Or is it
it's a persistent multi-user world.
Okay.
They've broken it into a bunch of different servers, mostly for regional latency issues. But it's amazing because they've combined your classic kind of world building sandbox and your sort of longer term RPG adventure story where you're playing out the full Dune kind of concept and, what's happened with the characters and the politics and the intrigue. And you can also get into battles and player versus player stuff, but only if you want to. You don't have to. But it's got a little bit of everything. And I swear every time I play that game, I both get an adrenaline rush because you're trying to fight, survive, but it's also a lot of fun to adventure with your group. It's just challenging enough to make you kind of focus and work. Teamwork is important, but you can do solo play if you want to. But anyway, I'm ranting a little bit. But what I loved about it is it kept the flavor of Dune. It kept the story is there. What they did is they basically split the timeline and said, what if Paul never happened?
Oh.
What if his mom followed the rules? And what would have happened to Dune at that point? And so you get to play in that world. And figure it out as you go. So
Well,
anyway,
cool.
yeah.
All right, I have a serious question for you, though. And sorry, Rachel, I'm veering a little bit. Of the Dune movies, which was your favorite?
The first.
So I mean, not the Denis Villeneuve ones. The first, there was the 1980s David Lynch version.
Oh,
There was the Denis Villeneuve, and then there was like a made-for-TV one or something somewhere in there. There was 3. I think there was 3. I'm just curious, which was your favorite?
I still like the books. I'm not really a fan of the movies as much. They don't do the same justice. Frank was such a vivid writer. That you would see the story playing in your head. I don't think there's a movie around that can do it justice to that degree.
I mean, I thought the Denis Villeneuve one was really, really good. I don't think there's any question. I still love the David Lynch one. It was so weird. It was so David Lynch. All the inner monologue, all of that was just, and it didn't really follow the books as well as the Denis Villeneuve did, but it just still was my favorite. I don't know why. But anyway, back to video games. Play a lot of Call of Duty. But that's because my friends play Call of Duty and they live in another state, and it's my way of talking with them and hanging out. But when I'm playing on my own, I got really into, Borderlands was a favorite. I like shooters.
Did you do Fallout?
I did Fallout. I did all the and I started playing Fallout 4 again when Fallout came out.
I did too. It's a lot of fun. The mechanics of that game are really well done. And it plays on old hardware. So, hey.
Yeah. I played, gosh, why can't I think of the name of it? It was a Starfield, which was very much a gigantic world. Just kind of go do your own thing. And it was like you could just kind of waste a ton of time.
because it was kind of a sci-fi Fallout.
It was. It was Fallout. It was Fallout. And I would joke about, this is just Fallout. But then it got a little repetitive for me. It's kind of like Fallout.
I only did one reboot. I finished Starfield one round, did the N+1. And ended up in a world where I couldn't save. And I'm like, no, I'm done. I think they fixed that.
I think I got to 3 and then it just was so repetitive. I was like, I'm good.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So we're at almost 35 minutes and we could talk. Maybe we should just make this episode.
April, this happens all the time. Like we go like an hour and 45 minutes when we do these. It's totally normal.
But I would like to get into some of the topics that April is uniquely positioned to have conversations with about. And first, I just want to do a shout out. In a community like ACPE, what I have observed over the years is there are people who are natural sharers and teachers and willing to dig in and share. We've talked to Mark about lurkers also, the people who are learning every day from those people who are more chatty but are more quiet. And in my first years in ACPE, sometimes there would be elbow throwing on the email list. Well, I can't understand why you would choose that brand or why you would do that thing. Not very often, but there was some posturing around what decisions people were making in a mostly friendly or mostly harmless way. And so what I've noticed just this past week, and I made a note so that I would remember it, wanted to really just say that the Microsoft channel in Discord, over a number of days, Patrick from Catlin Gable and Matthew from Napa Vine, they did this really good, how would I do this? And then back and forth on the answer and a back and forth on that didn't work. And instead of hiding it because, oh, I don't want to anybody to know that I don't know this, I'm asking this open question. I just think that's some of the most powerful moments of ACPE, again, on the email list and in Discord, and this Microsoft channel kind of back and forth. And I can imagine that there are a dozen or 3 dozen or 4 dozen people who maybe didn't chime in the flow of conversation, but walked away learning something and knowing how to do something.
I remember the teachers that would say, you should ask that question because somebody else in class has the same question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And instead of it being a DM, like, ooh, I'll DM you, right? It was there in the public channel. And I just wanted to share appreciation for that, because I think those moments where we're brave and bold enough to ask a question, like, I haven't done this before and I need to figure it out. And then watching that byplay, it was just really graceful. So Patrick and Matthew, I was like, oh, this is pretty fascinating. So I'm going to call it out and mention it. It was really great.
And that has been the power of ACPE for so long. And, this is my plug for anybody who's listening or wants to contribute. I was in a session where we were talking about collaborative groups once, and some of the small district people said we're intimidated to share our thoughts and ask questions because some of the big districts might basically look down on us like we're not capable. And I'm like, no. Absolutely not. We're all here to help each other and ask the question. Just ask the question. Nobody is going to look at you and go, why did you ask that question? That's crazy.
Well, and to be honest, some of the smaller districts are more agile than we are and can experiment more and learn more and teach us.
And that is exactly what I said in that. Was like, we can move quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Some of those big districts is like steering a giant ship.
So as we continue to tiptoe in towards the technical topics, we got MS-ISAC changes, something that we used to be able to subscribe to in terms of the information sharing, the threat and the intel emails. Those are now for a fee. Do you both have a plan on a yes or no yet, if you're able to share it?
I can share a little on my side. So they provided a number of services, from basically notifying folks when there might have been a ransomware about to launch. They did the sort of DNS, secondary DNS support for the malicious domain blocking. A lot of us do that through our filters now. So the filter vendors kind of fill that role. We did a side-by-side comparison on cost, and K-12-6 is actually cheaper if you don't use all the services. MS-ISAC has twice as many services, right? We're going to get our Styx taxi from K-12-6 at this point, I think. They have a platform for sharing confidential content, which that's one of my big things. Is I would love districts when they have cyber events to share details. I've been working with OSPI on this and even trying to work with the cyber insurance vendors on this. We need a place where we can tell each other when there's an active event, there's an indicator of compromise, because we all use the same stuff, right? We use the same apps, we use the same appliances, we use the same platforms. If there's a hole that hits one of us, it's likely to hit more than one of us. So I'm really excited about getting people to share in those protected spaces. Obviously, we don't want that to go to the press or to the criminals, but we want to be able to share it with each other. Right now, I don't know if I can convince my management team to let me have both, the K-12-6 side and the MS-ISAC side. We're big and our price tag's pretty significant, so I might try to make do. The one thing I'm worried about is the NCSR, their assessment, was tied to grant applications for the state and local grants, the cybersecurity grants. So how do I decouple that? I don't know. That's a problem. So in my perfect world, I would still do both, because I think they each bring different things to the table. But if I have to pick one, I'm probably going to go with the cheaper one because our budgets are in dire straits right now.
Yes, all that. I am smaller, and proportionally, it's still a decent percent of our budget, but I'm still trying to decide if I want the double layer. I think I'm a K-12-6 member, and then I do the MS-ISAC again for the the threat intel. We don't do a lot of the ancillary services because we have other products that are doing some of the vulnerability scanning and things like that for us. But what I really like about the K-12-6 that adds an extra layer that the MSISAC reports don't have, April, is the weekly ransomware and the threats by sector and the incidents by sector. And each time that I look at that weekly email and it says for the critical sectors, right, so many in energy, so many in infrastructure, this and that. And then we get to education and there are some weeks where it's like 1 or 3 in education. And then there are other weeks where we have 8 or 9 or 11, right? And the other more critical kind of top line Maslow hierarchy of needs, electric, water, roads, finance, they have many more. And then there have been weeks this past year, especially that I've noticed, April, where the education number is higher than the other critical infrastructure groups.
Well, and I get that group tends to spin up ad hoc sessions in a hurry so we can share details about specific attacks like we did with the whole PowerSchool thing.
Yes.
That was important because it's K-12 only, right? It's not trying to cover all the bases, and sometimes that's helpful.
Yes.
Now, that said, they don't have all the same services. So if you need those services, then you got to go pay for it. That's a decision every district's going to have to make.
Mark, I think you said maybe you don't have quite a bead yet on what you're doing.
It's more of a conversation with my network admin. This is kind of back to the budget thing. In our last tech levy, we were supposed to have a network security cyber specialist. We ended up cutting that position, which is not something anybody ever wants to hear, but it's tough right now. We're planning another levy right now, and it's not fun trying to, make a tech levy stretch. But something we are doing, because we're still kind of in the space of building out our full security posture through appliances and services. I mentioned it right at the beginning. We just picked up Abnormal for email security. It's kind of one of our last pieces that I think we really needed to do until I heard April talking about, what was it, your web app filter? Talking about that. And I was like, oh my God, we need a web app filter now.
Yeah.
I was an elementary teacher, April. I did not go to school for this stuff. And in our planning right now, I'm trying to show our committee, which is made up of teachers and administrators and district office people, what our differentiation of spending is going to. And I made a whole section of just cybersecurity. And I go, it did not look like this before. It has never looked like this before. This is a cost that it doesn't matter how big or how many students we have. This is a cost that applies and is growing and is a responsibility that we have even as our enrollment is dropping. This is just more and more responsibility that sits on our shoulders to protect student data, and to be good stewards of that information.
So can I tell my little story about my 22 school districts that I've talked to? Actually, now
Sure.
23. So I've talked to 23 school districts that have been ransomed because I didn't want Seattle Public Schools to be next. And I said, how did the bad guys get in? And there's only 3 answers. So this can inform your risk management approach. The first method is fairly obvious. It's you didn't patch something that was exposed to the internet, whether that was a server, a router, a VPN appliance, something that should be patched and needs to be patched in a critical way. So that's one. The second method is when the user gets a phish, right? And they have local admin rights. A regular phish is not as dangerous, but a phish where the user has admin rights can sink its teeth into that device and move laterally, right? And infect the district. And then the third method is when there's a stolen username and password from one of 1,000 places, right, where the usernames and passwords get stolen. Happened to School Dude, happened to Evite, all of those places. They use that account to log into the district and get VPN or remote access without an MFA component. And that also applies to our vendors, because unfortunately they reuse usernames and passwords across clients. So long story short, phishing is a threat, but I'd say the admin rights make that more of a threat if you give your users admin rights. And then patching, which is where that WAF came in. Some of the things we haven't been able to patch in a timely way because there either wasn't a patch available or we couldn't. It would break something that we'd done. And so we put that web application firewall up so that we could basically filter the attacks out before it got to the at-risk device.
Yes.
So that's why we did that. That's because we self-host. If you don't self-host, less of a problem, but we definitely do. So I don't know if that helps with your risk assessment or not, but that's my little story about ransomware threats.
Without getting into, because this is going to be exactly what you are asking for, but I'm not going to do it. I think everybody has some sort of story, whether it's minor or major. But in the Olympia School District, we've dealt with a couple of things here and there, but in my conversations, which we may meet this person at some point in time in a later podcast, I was left with some advice from an attorney who we were working with, who said, you obviously need to focus on your outer wall protection kind of stuff. But he goes, you really can't skip anything on the inside. He goes, because it doesn't matter. They're getting through. They will get through, over, under, however it happens. Someone's going to get through, and it's what they find on the other side.
Yep.
And it just was, it was kind of depressing, because I think we expect some level of perfection or some absolution. I think maybe that's just me, of saying, yeah, they're not going to get through. We're good. We're solid. No one's going to actually make their way into our network. And this attorney, who all they do was, ransomware, data breach kinds of stuff, was like, you're not stopping it. You're never going to stop this.
No, it's part of my job. And that's what I've tried to tell my bosses is I have to assume compromise. I have 48,000 kids and devices and 7,500 staff and devices. Somebody's going to make a mistake every day. So my job is to detect it and respond to it and keep the blast radius small. And the way I do that now is I've moved more towards automation. The moment that XDR, that sort of advanced antivirus tool pops up with an alert, we isolate that user and that machine, and we come back and deal with it in the daytime, because we used to let it go. Now the risk is too large. We shoot first and ask questions later, unfortunately. Yes. But what it allows us to do is isolate a threatening machine or a threatening account and deal with it, because we have to assume that there's a compromise in progress. Yep. Limit the blast radius.
Yes. And that assumption that you're going to have an alert. Mark, to your point, they're going to get through. I, a number of years ago, kind of moved my thinking from the onion model of layered security and cybersecurity, right? So like making sure that you have these layers like an onion does, and then protecting that heart of the onion, to the Swiss cheese model. And Mark, when you were talking earlier, the Swiss cheese model, what it assumes is there's a hole that somebody can poke through. You just assume that. And so then the idea is that when you look at a block of Swiss cheese, it's pretty solid, right? And like you can you can shoot arrows at it, but it's not going through. And it is the 100 or even a dozen layers of Swiss cheese with the holes that are in little different places on each of the slices. But when you stack them together, so the outer wall versus that inner wall and the users, assuming that there's a hole in each of those, and then trying to stack or layer security as deeply as we can to make it more of a block rather than a single slice with a
and
different
vendors, different tools. Yeah.
But there is one thing that is unique to us, unlike any other industry, and that's our students.
Yep.
And just basically tell me another industry where you give all of your clients, let's just call them clients, a machine that get to use your network from the inside.
Well, hopefully we're doing a better job of segmenting and treating them as the outside internet users that they really are.
Correct. But I still come back to, we're giving you credentials to our systems, our network. We're handing you a device. We're putting you in computer science classes, robotics classes.
Oh, yeah.
And in a lot of those clubs, they're asking for higher level permissions because they need to do certain things. And there isn't, my spouse is in finance. She's in banking. And I'm like, okay, you have your firewalls. You actually limit how much access your employees get. Yet this would be like giving everybody who has a bank account with you the right to come into your bank's network and use it with the device you gave them.
Yep. Yep.
That is the world that we live in. And these kids are smart.
They are.
Smart.
Yep. Yeah, we could probably trade a few horror stories in that space too, on what they're doing and how they're doing it. Everything from re-imaging the device, taking it off of management completely, putting their own OS on it. We had Dell devices that you can basically reset the BIOS password by going to a website, feeding it the serial number, and back comes this access code that gives you override. And so then they just reimage the box. Ugh. And that's one method, but at least it's no longer running with trusted credentials and trusted keys, right? But yeah, they get pretty clever. in what they're doing. Computer science is a particularly strong challenge for us because we do end up poking holes for them to be able to compile and run code and download from GitHub. We actually block GitHub for staff because so many malicious downloads were coming from there. Somebody would hit a compromise link and it'd try to go fetch its compromised code from the GitHub site. So we started blocking it because of that. But yeah, the computer science kids get a lot of extra rights and privileges, and they become definitely a larger threat vector.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do you segment them out in essentially like a padded room?
Insofar as we can, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All the students are in a padded room of a sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't be able to see the production servers doing HR or other things of that nature. At the same time, it's kind of a fine line between handicapping them to the point where they can't do their work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
a number of years ago, it was during 2020 or 2021 when we were doing the virtual conferences, Worldwide Technologies, Worldwide Tech, WWT, was on as a sponsor. And I had been hearing chatter about that in podcasts that I was listening to in that window of time as well. And I do think, so they're a virtualization and a lab learning space. I mean, they do a lot of other things also, but one of the things that was really intriguing as I learned more about services
I'd love
like
for
that.
them to do all that work in a virtual playground and not on my network. Yeah,
yes. I'm curious about as we continue growing
some of them are moving
cybersecurity
that way.
classes.
Yeah, especially the cybersecurity, like pen testing or, offensive work. I'm like, you cannot do that on our network against our gear. I'll shut it down and you will cease to have fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go practice elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I am kind of curious sitting here. I don't know in this moment on this episode, but I wonder if there's somebody who's doing university or K-12 focused lab environments.
Oh, I know.
For this.
Yes, there are several folks. I think even like the cyber.org folks have virtual labs that you can run practice stuff in. But yeah, there's a bunch of vendors in that space. You just have to be intentional about making sure you poke the holes so that your filter doesn't break it and all of that fun stuff.
Right. This is complex work that we do. I think I'm always surprised when we talk to universities and others at events like this that we were at this week, and they realize the scale and the complexity of, Mark, to your point, students are learning on this network and growing on this network, and sometimes are also the threat inside the house on this network.
Well, and I'll say my students keep getting younger. It's second graders that are trying to subvert the firewall this year. Second graders. They're 8 years old?
Oh my gosh. What's the hot thing for second graders this year? What's the new Club Penguin that they're trying to get to at school?
Well, in this particular case, we had one kid who was in a special filter group, so he couldn't get to as many things because he was really hard to keep on task in class. And he was logging in with other kids' accounts because he figured it out. And then when we stopped him from doing that and locked it so it could only be one account on one device, he started finding sort of Chrome-style backdoor proxy things. And it kept going. And it was like, he's 8. Oh my gosh.
Oh, the resourcefulness of an 8-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
so speaking... Oh, go ahead.
And we've even seen the resourcefulness of a group of kids working together for a common goal. And that, if you get a motivated teenager and you get a group of motivated teenagers who have a common focused goal, they're actually kind of scary. Yeah.
We were
persistent.
They grew up in this world. They have a hive mind. They have superpowers that, as much as I wish I could have claimed I was that, I mean, I was a bright kid, but they have us beat because they amplify each other in an amazing way. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do to save the world, but oh my gosh, in my school district.
Not using our network.
Yeah. Please don't break everything before you get out.
Yes.
Well, you've heard about it. Some kids download to prank somebody. I had one kid try to download what he called a virus stick. GitHub also tried to infect a friend because he wanted to mess with him. Had another kid download Ion Cannon trying to lag somebody because they were playing a game. So yeah, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to focus too much on the kids, but you are literally letting somebody walk through your firewall. And so I did this was a few years ago, but
we firewall every VLAN, just saying.
I showed our principals what a flipper zero is.
Yep.
I got one out in a staff meeting and I said, you need to take a good look at what this is right here. And if you see one, confiscate it immediately. And we got a couple. Like, they didn't know what to do with them. And they said, will you come get it? And we're like, sure, it's not our property. We can't take it.
Yeah, because they can clone access badges for the buildings is one of the easier
There's
ways.
a
And
lot
then
of
they can
things.
also remote control the TVs, like the shared media devices. Yeah.
Elevators,
can-
I think, was the
Elevators.
Beaverton story. It was
Okay.
something to do with the elevators.
And they can brute force attack your wireless networks just to bring them down with this particular modules they can put on there. But like, we've been having an ongoing conversation about two-factor on our access control, because our badges, unless you have within the last couple of years, access control system, your badges aren't encrypted at a high enough level.
No, not at all. And
Thankfully,
we've
we've
tried
been
really
putting-
hard. We have a
Yeah.
rule. You cannot students will occasionally want to vandalize something that is public and visible, like a reader board. So we've been really sticklers about reader boards and things like it should not be available to the student network. It shouldn't be routable. They shouldn't be able to play with it. We have to get really serious about all the Internet of Things so that they don't get messed with. But to your point, some of them spin up their own little local Wi-Fis, right? Or Bluetooth or some other method of messing with them. And a kid with a device like those flippers can have at it.
Yes. So really quickly, as we talk about the threats inside the house, and then we talk a little bit about, we'll transition into some of the threats outside of the house. I did some more reading of the COSIN State of Ed Tech report, and I was really startled, not in a negative way, but just startled at the perceived risk question in that report. And what startled me is, and there's a little bit of narrative about it in the report as well, there are the highest high risk score that we think this is a big deal and a big risk is for phishing scams, and it's only 27%. And then the next drop down is to 13% in the high, and most of these are in the 40 to 50% in the medium risk, and then a handful of them are in the high 40s and 50% in the low risk. And I still feel like, when I run down the list, unauthorized disclosure of teacher data, unauthorized disclosure of student data, malware or viruses, identity theft, phishing scams, ransomware attacks, and DDoS attacks, I still feel like my threat level is pretty high on each of those. And that I do think that there are active attempts, and they are something that we should still be defending against, because perhaps it's that our defenses are getting better, so it feels like the risk level is a little lower, but it's because of the things that we are catching and rejecting, not that the threats themselves have decreased, or that the importance and the impact when we do get nicked by one of those is less. So I thought it would be a little more balance in terms of people still having some sense of a high perceived risk of some of those.
Yeah, I think with the ransomware incidents in both states that there'd be a bit more concern in that space. But this is a national survey. So I will say K20 has done a great job for Washington schools, those that are on it. They installed denial of service attack protection gear at the head end, so it rarely trickles down to the schools. So we can kind of ignore that to some degree, and I appreciate their efforts in that space.
That was I'm on the K20, or at least used to be on the K20 NAC committee, or NAC. I don't need to say committee twice, but that was a long conversation we had about putting that at the head and what we were going to pick. And it was really actually a lot of fun. And I said to Dennis Small at the time, I go, why do you have me on this committee? I was a 6th grade teacher. And he goes, no, you understand what we're saying. He goes, and you kind of are a translator. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I'm not going to offer a lot of technical insight on this, but that is one huge benefit to the K20, is that we have that DDoS protection at the head. And funny enough, we actually were DDoS during finals at semester this year, and it was such a terrible attack, it made it through.
Ooh.
I don't think it knew what to do with it. It was just so mediocre. It was kind of like we'd be up and we'd be down. We'd be up and we'd be down. And we would call the knock, and we're just like, what's happening here? And they're like, well, we see it, but it's just weird. And I was like, I don't know. It's not fully taking us down. And I'm sure it was a kid who was finals and just,
paid his
service.
$30.
Yep.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So threats outside the house, and then talking about some of the incidents and the response. Mark, you were talking on a recent episode about the phishing vendor, a more complex one with a vendor and a shipping. April, I think you also have a business email compromise story that's a little interesting here recently.
Yeah, I'm a little worried that AI is playing into that game now. So in our case, they spun up a domain that looked like Seattle Schools with an extra L. And they had faked email conversations with several staff members. They faked an email conversation with somebody who normally orders equipment, and then one of the purchase ordering managers, and one of the purchasing order agents. And they had a multi-week conversation with this poor vendor, convincing them that they needed to buy it, and they were putting together a PO, and they were putting together the requisition process, and they followed it for weeks. The vendor shipped the equipment oddly out of state. What convinced them to ship something to Texas that was supposed to go to Seattle is a different conversation. But they convinced the vendor to send it. And this happened to 2 different vendors, $200,000 worth of laptops. One of the vendors had never done business with Seattle before. So what it feels like is the bad guys have compromised several VARs. They've collected the emails from those VARs where they were doing the conversations back and forth. They've built a database. They know titles, logos, and processes. And they're building attacks based on that information. And they're repeating it, rinse and repeat with multiple vendors. We literally went back and notified 5 years worth of vendors that this was happening, that we were being spoofed. People were sending out emails that looked like us, but they weren't ours, and that looked like it was coming from our people. And they'd play this game for weeks, and they'd build trust. I don't know that it helped. And the worst part is some of the vendors didn't get a warning because they aren't our vendors.
Right.
So how do you get that message out at a state level? Or even a federal level? I don't know. So obviously it's happening to other districts as well. I think AI is making this easier. It's connecting the dots. They've built a giant customer relational database in the sky that I think the bad guys can rent. It's just making these attacks smoother and smoother.
IBM is one of the groups that's been tracking to get a moving target, keep an eye on a moving target of how AI is amplifying these, what were fairly run-of-the-mill BECs or business email compromise type of situations. And the last stat that I saw is that we are over 50% now of either AI enhanced, AI launched, or AI continued. So let's say a chatbot, right? The continuation of the conversation or the email thread. And that is where the defensive side tools, so talking about email security, talking about some of these extra layers, talking about the XDRs and the MDR, and letting the automation pieces. My layers of Swiss cheese are I have a small team, small but mighty team. And my whole goal over the next year to 5 years as this evolves is the piece of Swiss cheese that they are, my human engineers. I want them not having to worry very much about the noise. And they're that layer closest to the critical systems. And it is the signals, right? It is that we've got a layer of email security. We've got the MDR. We've got, fill in the blank on all of these other pieces of Swiss cheese with their holes all not matching up. And having those people, right? Whether they be our engineers, or we'll talk a few minutes about process as it relates to the AI bloom as well, the people process and how we do things internally, but really trying to reduce the noise, the just millions of pops an hour that we could be running after and then missing some of the big arrows coming through. And I think as we realize the AI is week over week adding another percentage click or two in terms of how it's amplifying these attacks, what products are kind of catching up with that and staying abreast of it to help us keep those holes as small as possible. It's an arms race right now.
AI is helping both sides, definitely.
Both sides.
Yeah. I would say for a while I was ignoring impossible travel alerts, which is when an IP address shows up in 2 places at once, because so many folks were using VPNs, so many folks were using cell phones with IPv6 addresses that could look like they're anywhere in the US. But the AI tools are better at helping me sift the signal to noise, and they feed me the probable travel events that really are seriously concerning, that might be a Linux host or something that is abnormal. It knows what's normal and it knows what's not. And so now I can start looking at those events again, because it's not 9 out of 10 of them are just VPNs. So I'm hoping that there'll be more wins in that space where the AI saves us some time, and helps reduce our workload so that we can concentrate on the things that matter.
Yes. So on these spoofing attacks and business email compromises, where they're learning our patterns, learning our language, we're a small enough organization that over 10 years ago, we started having the conversation of no changing ACH. We had a couple of universities in Oregon get caught early in this on the construction bonds
Mm-hmm.
and sent millions of dollars to the Cayman Islands. One, or at least one university, did not get their $3 million back. The FBI wasn't able to come riding in on a white horse.
These are people processes and business
People
processes that
processes.
do the controls, not technology. Yeah, you are
Exactly.
right on the money. There's
And
so many of those.
We're small. You both have larger organizations. Is that the conversation in the business offices and HR and risk management and facilities, or are there tools that are better tuned for the larger organizations on this?
I think, at least for my group, we're looking seriously at people processes, another set of eyes going back to the older records. I mean, you might be able to automate some of that secondary lookup stuff, but it's really a business process of validating that the request is real. Sometimes, like the MFA resets that we're seeing, we must have had 20 MFA resets for principals that weren't really the principal. And how do you validate that? Well, you almost need, a video call with them showing their ID. In a way that can't be deep faked easy, right?
So April, you just tiptoed into the spicy layer that was coming next in this progression. So when April and I were chatting about April being a guest on the podcast, Mark, we ended up in this conversation about the amount of recorded content.
Oh, yeah.
That is available online, even like as the Plugged In podcast exists, because we have not been canceled yet. We haven't said that yet
We
this
haven't.
episode. We have not been canceled yet. And years
Or
from
school
now,
board meetings, right?
school board meetings, all of the content from the pandemic that, is sitting out in buckets here, there, and everywhere with school district employees. And we know already, we haven't had a video one in our organization, but we have had a phone call AI conversation that was, to your point, April, right? The MFA reset. It wasn't MFA reset, but it was more business office focus. And it is the people process that we put in place 10 years ago that, as this landscape changes, still stopped that from being, right? Like, oh yes, I'll go ahead and change that because I know that person's voice and I know it's them telling me.
The last
and it wasn't
attack we
them.
had
And it wasn't them.
even included a W-9 process, right? They were trying to formally change it via W-9, which is kind of standard. It's like, oh my gosh, the business office has to be so much more careful now.
They do.
It's almost assume it's fraud until you can prove it's real.
Absolutely.
Sort of like we assume, compromise.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. The
Totally
efficiencies
agree.
of this era where, and I think about Mark, right, the financial side, and what the banks and the credit unions are dealing with, that for a brief moment in time, there were some efficiency gains because of technology and being able to request things and do things online. And now with the sophistication of the AI layers that are getting added in, my guess is that we will see a shift to more in-person requirements for banking changes in our school districts, right? People processes. It's going to be, I'm really, don't know, but I'm really curious on how, as the AI continues to get really good.
Well, okay. So I will say this. Our business office, obviously our finance team, they process all of the things that we want to buy. The one nice thing about it is, and I can't speak for Seattle because I haven't been in an organization that massive, but they're not choosing the things that we're buying. For the most part, we are. So at least we're presenting something to them that this is what we want you to purchase. It's through this vendor. We either have a W-9 on file with them already, or we're shepherding the W-9 process. We're small enough that my executive assistant can work with the company to get all the paperwork in place and then present it to the business office in a singular package, which has all the documentation that's needed. And yes, it's a little paper heavy, but I imagine at a Seattle, and I don't mean to speak for you at all, April, you have to streamline some of those things and have people maybe in the business office that have to take over some of those pieces because of the volume, of the purchasing that you do.
The purchasing manager generally is responsible, if they're onboarding a new vendor, of providing that documentation. It's the W-9 changes that do happen, eventually. Sometimes vendors do change, right? They do need to process a change. Does that go through the business office, and how do they vet it? Or does it go back to that manager of record and do they vet it, right? Somebody has to do the vetting, because we now kind of almost have to assume that a change like that is malicious.
Yeah.
I will say real quick, sorry, Rachel, not to cut you off. We do, at least in our district, have, and I actually spoke to, is it Eastman on your team? Is it Clint? Chris. Chris and I had, in one of our South Sound directors meetings, I asked the question specifically of Chris. I go, well, at least in Olympia, we buy in the tech department almost exclusively off competitively bid contracts. It's just easier for me from an auditing standpoint to be able to present to the auditor, all of these things were competitively bid. Here are the documentation stuff for it. It just makes it easier for me. But Chris said, we don't do that in Seattle because we're just too big. We actually go out to bid for a lot of our things because we need different variety of things or a different style of a particular thing. But at least for me, purchasing off a contract at a district our size, I'm sorry, I'm getting there in a really long, convoluted way, helps me feel more secure in the fact that I'm comfortable with the vendor that I'm buying from. And it's me. I form a really strong relationship with the vendors that I work with, and I have no problem.
But if that vendor contact got phished and they used a legitimate vendor email account to make a W-9 request, what would be your controls?
Stop taking me to school, April.
So this is where I was going to jump in. April, thank you for opening the pathway. Mark, I hate to be a bucket of water.
No, it's okay.
But in addition to April's example, when you were talking about your executive assistant does like all the gathering, presents this dossier, right, to whoever it gets handed off to, that is exactly the attack that the AI impersonation has. There are attacks in the wild where it is that type of, your executive assistant has done this 2, 3, or 4 times, and there's some type of digital trail of it. And via whatever pathways, again, those pieces of Swiss cheese, right? Something that's got a hole in it where they've got this as like in Olympia, right? This is the process. And so unlike that 11th or 12th during the year packet that goes from your exec assistant to purchasing or to the business office, it's actually a well-crafted one that looks like it was just like the 11 or 12 before it, and it's actually completely fake. And then the conversation that follows mimics the patterns and the information flow back and forth on the ones prior, and it's an AI tick almost, but for the bad, rather than helping you book your replacement airfare, right, when your flight gets canceled. So you're absolutely right. And what the AI is starting to complicate is that it is impersonating. It can't get some general GPT types of conversations right and citing law and things like that. But in terms of picking up the human conversation on these fairly defined processes, let's keep picking on purchasing, it is showing up in unique ways, and districts are chasing a bot trying to get money back.
I've saw a conversation that was obviously made up by AI back and forth, but it was an approval conversation between the superintendent and the CFO. And they had everybody's name right. They had the signatures right. And they had this conversation talking about this, inquiry and then an approval and then an escalation. Please make this happen ASAP. And that was a very interesting attack. It failed because it's essentially fish and it was sourced from outside the district. But they are also finding sneaky ways to send mail that looks like it's from the district, even with our SPF and our DKIM and our DMARC set up. Some stuff still seems to get through the cracks, and that's really frustrating. So I'll be very interested to hear how your abnormal goes with your phishing controls, because that seems to be a hole for some of this impersonation and spoofing.
So the matching the attacks, right? Matching the opponents, right? Mm-hmm. We don't put in like a beginning fighter against an advanced. I am really curious about the email. I talked several times about email security this week in some of these events. Around it is the layer that is using the AI in a way that's really meaningful right now. And they have a quick pace in terms of, it's not something that it sits still for a year and then you get the next year's update or appliance. It is its body of knowledge, its corpus is updating minute by minute on the fingerprints and the patterns.
So kind of a random question, and this is more like what we do on our ACPE email list. And I'm going to do it here because why not? And April, this is a question for you. Do you have a separate purchasing and management control or contract control system or something outside of your ERP?
Yes.
So you've got to be one of the only school districts I know that has that because we just can't afford something like that. It's rolled into our
new-ish. It used to be all in one, but they went with this to basically, I think, to help do a reduction in staffing and simplify the workload. So they went to an external platform for processing. And it automates a lot of that, the invoice processing and the approvals and the onboarding. It also is used, I think, for trip and expense planning stuff, for employee reimbursements, and all of that goes through the new system.
Does it have the capability of doing two-factor out to your vendors to make those changes?
Yes, but that's because we basically enforce the two-factor through singles.
Okay. I was thinking more along the lines of, like, if I want to make a change in some system, I have to get a verification code of an email
there
that I've
are
already
workflows for that.
registered.
Yes.
Okay.
So like the W9 thing
Mhm.
actually has a bunch of workflow things that come with it. And so to that point, some of those platforms I do think are learning from these kind of exploits and coming up with workflows and approval processes to make it better.
Yeah. I'm willing to bet that 75% of our membership have no clue that there's a management system out there that could do a two-factor out to people who would want to make changes like that. Do you like yours? Would you recommend that school districts, is it affordable? I guess would be a question.
I don't know what we ended up paying for that. I doubt it was affordable, but I think it was offset by other savings. And I don't really want to name it because it's actually one of the vectors of attack. Right?
Sure. I was actually just going to say, if you're comfortable and our listeners are interested, would you mind if they emailed you or they got a
I'll
hold
put
of
something in the Discord.
Yeah.
Great.
That'd be great.
So I can put that in the podcast.
Because I don't want to drop a product in here either.
Well, and I love it in the sense that it seems to keep everybody honest. It has checklists for invoice processing. Some of the things that happen is when we had that vendor issue where the vendor shipped 200 grand of stuff, of laptops to Texas, they tried to send us the invoice and get paid for it. And we're like, yeah, that PO doesn't match. No.
Or at least the whole, sorry for really using this metaphor the whole episode, but the hole in that piece of Swiss cheese is in a different position, right, than part of the people process or the ERP process.
Yeah, for sure.
Thankfully, we all like cheese.
Some of us more than others.
Oh, it's a topic for another episode.
Yes.
The string cheese and the dog, I can make the dog do almost anything with the right kind of cheese.
Oh my gosh.
I think they call it high motivation something. There's different, types of treats that get different levels of attention and follow through, and cheese is pretty high up there on the happy list. And there are some who think that you get the same feeling from cheese that you do from chocolate. So there you go.
Hey, I mean,
I like both. I'm okay with that.
I think I lean more the chocolate, but no, it is fun. I do love the Swiss cheese analogy. It's great. It's reminds me of that word Swiss law. Oh,
Sorry,
somebody in that way.
April, we have to take a little 5-minute cheese break. Speaking of cheese. Yes, Mark, who do you know at Siusla?
Oh, it's Siusla. God, I was like Swiss, like, okay.
Similar letters. Very good.
It's Chris something.
It is.
Chris Rowbotham.
Hi, Chris. We're sorry, Chris.
April has no idea what we're talking about.
Chris, I do.
Chris is a friend and a fan of the podcast.
Yes. So we're getting in all of the oldies but goodies this evening.
Yes. We have to.
Yeah.
We must.
So, April, we could spend we've been recording for a while now, and I know we could do almost an entire episode on this, but you've also had the responsibility, the honor, and the privilege to help in response for some of the incidents that have happened. Is there, we talk about the first part of your incident response plan is the preparation. Have the plan. You have to have a plan. And preparation is part of response, right? Preparing is part of response. But what are some highlights or things that, as you're moving through this career in the space that you're in, things in common, things that you would want people to know, things you find surprising?
Well, actually, I haven't done that many responses. I'm on the before the boom part. There's a lot of other folks who take kit after the event. But, I talk about what I can do to prevent that from happening. I do strongly encourage districts, if they don't have one, to stop everything and go out and download an incident response plan and fill it out. That's how I usually help districts that are in trouble, is I basically point them to the k126.org/IR. If you don't have anything else, that's a place to start. Right? The incident response plan template. But go grab it, make it happen. There's a one-pager which basically says, you identify your cyber insurance vendor and the numbers required, and you identify your law enforcement contacts and all the rest of it. And it takes a whole, 30 minutes to fill out that sheet, but it's really important if you've lost access to the rest of your systems,
Absolutely.
Right? And that's one of the things, I guess there's a couple lessons learned that I guess I would share with districts. One is you need to have a plan so that assume that you might lose comms, right? You might lose your email, you might lose your phone stuff, you might lose your chat, your common chat. So have a third-party method to communicate with each other that's outside the system. That's one. Another one is you need to practice with a tabletop and talk with your senior executive team, your cabinets, about what's really important to get back first. We just finished what we call a bare metal restore drill to bring back core services. This is routing, DHCP, DNS, functional networking, functional login, before we can bring any applications back, right? That takes us about 24 hours. So for 24 hours, you're dead in the water. You got to figure out what you're going to do. After that, what do you want back first? Because it all takes time, effort, and resources, right? So some districts might want their cameras and their safety systems and their access badges back first. Other districts might want their intercoms and their phones back first, right? You have to have those conversations before the event to figure out what's really important. And to do that, facilitate a tabletop and talk it through.
Yeah.
Right? So that's another important thing, so that you know what needs to come back up first when you're in that situation. And then, of course, the immutable backups. If you can delete the backup, the bad guys can also. So you need to make sure whatever you're doing for backups, whether it's tapes or immutable systems or whatever, that you cannot, no matter what you do, no matter who you call, you can't delete that backup. Because one district actually ran into a situation where the bad guys called their vendor, their cloud backup vendor, said, "We're terminating the service. Please delete all our content." And they did. The vendor did. So make sure your backups are immutable. That's another piece of it, because otherwise you can't restore it. Also know, your time to restore, right? If you're relying on the cloud to do your backups, you know how long it takes to back up to the cloud, right? If you were doing a full backup, it will take just as long to pull all that data back down, unless you get like a snowball shipment where you can get up, and you should know that's available for many vendors. You can get a chunk of hardware shipped to you that might actually be faster than trying to pull it down out of the internet. So that's another one. And the last one I would mention for recovery is reimaging, especially for the Windows districts. So it takes us now granted, we're huge, right? 50,000 kids. It takes us 4 weeks to reimage computers in the summer. And that's working pretty hard. I just made a deal with the client guys. I bought them a whole bunch of gear for my disaster and cyber budget so that they could cut that in half and maybe even down to a week, because that will speed them up every year. So it's an investment in the district's ability to get the job done, but it will also bring us back faster in the event where I have to reimage every device. So those are some lessons learned. One other lesson learned to keep in mind is free and reduced lunch stuff. If you want to get paid back by the feds, you have to keep logs. So even if you decide to try to feed everybody, you still need to keep a paper record of who you're feeding, because if you want reimbursement, you have to be able to prove it. And that's probably true in a couple cases. Payroll, obviously, can be a challenge if the timing is terrible. I've heard of at least one district where they missed payroll as a result. You might think about working out a relationship with the bank first to say, hey, can you rerun last month's payroll? It's terrible in August, right? But if this is September, October, November, well, maybe October, November, December, you might be able to re-roll last month's payroll and try to clean it up later. That might work for a district. It might not. I'm not saying it'll work for yours, but it's something to keep in mind. So those are a couple of interesting tactics that districts have had to take in this space.
So, in this conversation, how would you scale this conversation for the majority of districts, say, that are in my ESD? So we're the second largest school district in ESD 113, and we have 9,500 kids. It's just a ton of little districts. And it is nice that, at least for us, their student information systems and their ERP are Skyward for the most part, and it's all hosted up at WSIPSI. So that's
they're
not
doing
a
some
huge...
really interesting collaboration things. I'm hoping to talk them into encouraging districts to do incident response plans and some other really cool stuff.
But where would you, or how would you recommend a district that has a person or two people that wear all the hats? Where would they start?
With the IR plan template. Go take a look at k126.org/IR. It's only 10 pages long. It's as short as we could make it. And you should be able to fill that out in an hour. And it won't kill you. Even your smallest district can probably manage to make it useful, and it'll give them some place to start. There are other plans that are far more sophisticated and have lots more detail and depth. And when they feel the need, they can upgrade to that, but start small and start simple, and it's still a step in the right direction.
As April said earlier, even just that first page, the inventory of who you need to have phone numbers for.
Who to
in the
call.
heat of the moment because you can't look them up on your on your device if it's a
Well, I mean,
district
Yes.
device.
I think it's a really relevant question for our group because, it's really interesting having been on the board for a few years now. I look at the list of Washington school districts all the time, and I'm always trying to match up. But there's a bunch of us that are always trying to match up who the tech director or CIO, CTO is in those spaces. And it drops down into the 2,000 student districts real quick.
Yeah.
Real
Well,
quick.
what is 70% of the districts across the U.S. are under 2,000 kids?
Yeah, it is. And I think Washington matches pretty well. There are a lot of really, really small districts. And, thank you to Rachel and the ESDs that provide support to those districts. It's essential because they just can't do it on their own.
I think I would love to see the ESDs do a workshop where maybe it's just a couple hours. They do workshops fairly regularly with their members, and maybe just have one of those to put together an IR plan workshop.
You walk out the door with your
You
incident
walk out the
response
door
plan.
with your plan.
Yep.
Because it's hard in those districts to get the time
Mhm.
to go do this, and that's also a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
If the ESDs are able and willing, I think it would be a good investment for everybody involved, because they end up helping deal with the incident after the fact too. So if they can help the district be better prepared, that's the other thing. Your turnaround, how quickly you come back online and how effectively you can get back to teaching and normal work is significantly reduced. It takes, you're much faster back on the ground if you have a plan, if you've done the work. So it pays off.
One example in a district that we've done a number of tabletops with is the Open School, Don't Open School one. So we have a series. We start with payroll to get the attention of leadership and the understanding that this is not, you're going to sit and do your reports and things like that. This is, while we talk tech, this is like we are a leadership team managing a crisis together. The second one is the go, no go on can we open school? And so what I like about the active tabletop model rather than a 2-hour kind of, like high level one is that you walk away with something like, so the temperature's forecast for 22 degrees tomorrow and our HVAC is offline and we have 22 schools and we have one controller stick and one laptop that's authorized to restart each of those local HVAC systems. And it takes an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on the school and the device and its age. And then there's, in one case, an hour and a half travel between the two that are the farthest away. So not having to solve that in the moment, but recognizing it and putting it on the board of like, okay, so let's go call the vendor and say, if we were in a situation like that and we really wanted to be able to open school the next day, but we needed essentially 17 hours to bring all of the boilers back online and get heat in the building, what are our options to be proactive about that? And so when you get the risk manager, the facilities manager, the superintendent, the CFO, the curriculum leads, can we have kids sign into whatever learning management platform you're using? If we don't have access to sign in with Google, let's say, is there a way that that vendor could essentially build a dummy account infrastructure with us for a week? And so the curriculum team going and talking to the vendors that were related to curriculum. What have you done in other incidents? What can we be proactive about planning for? It's these tabletops are really,
really good,
really lovely.
There's a business office hint in that tabletop you just reminded me of. I want to drop for our folks. Sometimes an open PO with a vendor that's only available for use in an emergency can be good.
Ooh.
And so if you arrange for that in advance and it's written, done by the lawyers properly, then you can actually establish a PO in advance, because paying is also hard.
Mhm.
Doing purchasing is hard when your ERP is down, right? So what could you do with some of those really key vendors to sort of prepay for disaster? So that's something to think about. So. Yeah.
And then our third one is communication. And as April said earlier, right, you may not have access to any of your communications infrastructure. And so start thinking ahead about what your plan is. Is it, creating a new website, going to a website host and creating a new website and alerting the media that this is the page, right, where all of the information is.
Or internal comms like Slack or something.
And internal comms are out. Yeah. What do you do? Go to individual signals do you all install Signal while you're in the same room together so you can verify, right, that you're getting the right people in the Signal chat? All of these, it's lovely to have these conversations at a table ahead of time to see the looks on faces saying like, what would we do? And it's still going to be hell, right? And it's still going to be an awful thing that you're going through. But if you've had some time ahead of time, the value of the incident response plan and then the tabletops that you can run against it is that you start realizing this would save us a couple of days if we asked in advance and we knew what our options were. Because this is our brand and this is how we do this. And have they learned from other incidents in other districts or in other organizations? And they're like, oh yeah, we can flip this switch for you. Those are the happiest answers.
You get me thinking I need to do a blog on lessons learned, document in a way that's accessible to everybody.
That would be great.
We'll stuff it in the Discord.
April, anything else on your list or your mind as we've been wandering through these topics?
Stitching time saves nine. If you can do a bit of prep, I think you'll find that it will pay off, because the other thing is you can practice your incident response plan on something smaller, right? Some sort of failed hardware or AC or power issue or whatever. You can practice it on small things, and it may even save you in the moment. It's muscle memory and getting into a place where you're comfortable with what you need to do next. Right. So practice helps. And I realize sometimes preparedness feels like a waste of time when we have so many other things to do, but I'm afraid it's more a case of when, not if. So
really back to that AI accelerator. I feel like the bad actors get out ahead first, and then the defensive actors and our partners and vendors play catch up.
Yeah.
And I think that an important takeaway from this conversation, and I think our membership knows this, is that we're here for each other.
Absolutely.
And I know that whenever April says anything in the email list, it's like,
yeah, we're listening.
What's happening? What's happening right now?
Yes.
We take you very seriously. I'll even say, having been on the program committee for the last couple of conferences, we don't really question what you submit to present, and we don't even wait for you to submit anything. We just carve out space for you because we know people want to hear the things that you would like to share with us. And again, I think that's the value of this, is we will have, colleagues going through this. We ourselves may go through this, and knowing that we can lean on each other a little bit, and having seen that happen, with some of the incidents that have occurred where school districts have shared, tech departments have shared resources to assist, has just been a testament, I think, to our organization and the values that we hold.
Yep, for sure. Thank you. This has been an amazing conversation, and I hope it's given people a lot to think about.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about this more.
I think we will. It's given me a lot to think about. I was making notes as April was talking earlier, like, I need to go back and double check that, or, ooh, I want to do that. And yes, thank you not only for talking security with us, April, this evening, and we've gone quite long because we were dithering at the beginning, but also talking about the series.
We have a Guppy Nine Toes.
We might have a Guppy Nine Toes.
Furball alert.
We have a
Guppy. Guppy's saying, okay, come on, Dad.
Okay.
You've been talking too long.
Well, thank
she
you
doesn't
both.
usually come up here unless I have food, which I don't, so who knows what's happening.
Oh, no cheese.
No cheese. She is a fan.
Actually, April, would that be a comfortable title for this one?
Yes.
No cheese.
No cheese.
No cheese. Okay. That was it. April, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll come up with a sign-off another time, Mark,
I guess
maybe.
so. It's just a work in progress. Suggestions welcome.
Yes. What a chat. Oh my gosh. April never disappoints.